Hey, it is Mark, and we are talking about Star Wars connecting to the prophetic. Now, I'm not the first person to talk about that sort of thing, but this one in particular has to do with a 1995 novel, and how I end up looking into that because of a vision that I had this morning. So yeah, let me explain that real quick. Um, so yeah, I was in my chair that I typically pray in, and if you saw the Washburn Fires prophetic message, then same place, probably around the same time in the morning, and I got a vision of a landscape, and at the same time, I heard a word plastene. So if you're like me, you've never heard that word. Well, you might have some ideas about what it is, but I didn't know. Picture, as soon as I saw it, it made me think like, hey, that's like a sci-fi scene or from a movie or story story of that kind, right? And so, but I wasn't I wasn't specifically thinking about anything Star Wars related, but we'll see why we're talking about Star Wars here in a minute, because I went to the Holy Spirit prophetic helper, which is Google, and you hear something you don't understand. And so that's what we end up doing. And so this is the results. Two primary ones. What is plastene? There's like something about a book. Wasn't quite sure when I saw that. And then I saw a company in India had this name, plastene. I was like, okay. But then this is the one I really saw, which was from Wikipedia or Wikipedia. If you're into Star Wars, you would know the site. It's got tons of information about not just the movies and shows, but all different um, iterations of the Star Wars storylines. So this is where I ended up on, and it is a material used for clothing, cheap buildings, and drinking mugs. What's that got to do with the picture that I saw, right? All right, so Star Wars. I just wanted to address too, like, why would God talk to you about some word that's in a Star Wars story? God uses all different things to speak to us. I'll just bring your attention to a couple of other Star Wars related prophetic things. Most notably, Robin Bullock had a message about the Mandalorian, and it's just like an overarching story about how it related to what we're dealing with, and it's about saving the child. They called it the child, and you can just, if you haven't seen it already, check this video out. We'll link it in the description, and you can see where this message comes in. And another kind of just fun one, I just heard this yesterday, I believe. Yeah, it was streamed live yesterday, and you have Jeff Tharp talking about God quoting Yoda to speak to him, and of course they're having a good laugh about that themselves. So back to my particular Star Wars prophetic message. So I'm going through here and I noticed that there is a first appearance. So think of first mention in the Bible. First appearance was this book called Children of the Jedi. It caught my attention. I didn't even look at the other ones, but I started to continue to follow the clues here to kind of get, where is God going with this message? What is he saying through all this? So then I did a Wikipedia search because we know that's a source of all knowledge. It's a joke. So you can see the lovely cover here with Luke and Leia and Han and this mysterious person in the back. So it actually includes favorite characters that we all know and love. If you're into Star Wars, Chewbacca's in, I guess, and C-3PO. So it's part of the what's called the Callista trilogy, and we'll get more into that. What's that all about? Don't read ahead. Maybe you already did when you looked at the screen, but that's okay. So we'll read this real quick as kind of a setup. So we're figuring, okay, I'm thinking, okay, what's the story here? Why does this matter? Why did God mention the word plastene? To me, as a spoiler for the whole thing, it was just to get me on the path to see this message that parallels with the things that have been dealing with, we are dealing with, and what God's ultimate plan is. So Han Solo, Princess Leia learn of the now abandoned Jedi stronghold on the planet of Belsavis from Drub Makrub, and travel there only. First big clue why we're on this message, only to discover a political conspiracy. Have there been any of those recently? involving a Force adept member of the ancient houses and the Emperor's Hand. That's just mumbo jumbo for the, but who is able to change programming of droids and mechanicals. All right, stop right there. So, if you've been paying attention to what happened in 2020 and election, all those kind of things, there is data scientists that have absolutely gone through Arizona results in particular and seen that there is a manipulation programming change within the data. So that's all right. So that's our first kind of clue here. We'll read a little bit more and we'll go over more of this. So meanwhile, Luke Skywalker, C-3PO, 2 Jedi students, and a myriad of selection of alien life forms, along with former stormtroopers or trooper, are abducted aboard the sinister Eye of Palpatine, possibly reactivated after 30 years. Palpatine, he's the bad guy. You see that pop up. This is the next big message here. They were fighting the effects of massive indoctrination, injury, and cold manipulation by the ship's artificial intelligence and its horrific security measures. And Luke discovers the Eye is bound for the destruction of Belsavas. Okay, if you're tracking along with the messages here, I think we may have noticed some massive indoctrination in the last couple years or so. Injury, cold manipulation. Think of, and I know this may not be the meaning within the book, but the wording, manipulation of our virus, in other words, in the last 2-3 years, that's on point. So yeah, so there, that's when I read that and I started seeing these keywords popping out to me. I'm like, oh wow, all right, this kind of sounds, some of these elements of the story, or the primary elements even, are describing some of the things we went through. Obviously the context and the way it's all described is totally different, but there's just key things, right? So the reality is, there is these 2 different plots. Han and Leia are doing the kind of trying to save these children. That's the other thing. The overarching theme of the whole book is the children of the Jedi, and they're trying to save the children. So what happened in 2022 in relation to saving the children? Roe v. Wade was overturned. And so that is a huge part of, so one of the 4 main things that I pulled out of that was save the children. Abortion as modern day Baal worship has been discussed by many Christian leaders. Another spelling of Baal or Baal, so B-A-L, is B-E-L. Where do we just see B-E-L? Bel save us? Oh, Bel's not going to save you. The Lord will save you and Jesus will save us, right? So here's this name, interestingly enough, with Bel in it as well. So Save the Children has been a monumental story in 2022, overturn of Roe v. Wade on June 24th. So Bel's not going to save and cannot save those aligned with him or the enemy. Actually, they lost ground and they will continue to do so, as we will see kind of played out in this story. The other major thing we talked about already is the manipulation of machines. So we talked about that. In the book, the antagonists on the planet were Raganda and her son Eric. So we'll take a look at Eric. And so here's an interesting thing about him. So there's a guy that installed sub-electronic converter into this guy Eric, allowing him to control droids and computers through the Force. So there's something that was implanted in this guy, and then he's able to control stuff. What's that sound like, right? If you followed that particular story, and especially on Prophets and Patriots channel with Elijah streams, there is definitely let's see if we can find that. Let's see, Rumble, Prophets and Patriots. Let's see if we can do that. Prophets, Patriots. Let's see. Storm's coming. 107. Trying to remember who that was. Roger Stone, Kaz Patel. It's from a little while ago. Ray Perkins. I'm not sure which one, but look it up. There's a couple of guys. I think there were like 4 people on that episode, and they talked about that in particular, what happened in Arizona with the data that they studied. Maybe it might have been another channel, another thing. I'm not finding it right now, but you may have known, you may have seen that, you maybe realized. So the other thing that was interesting about this character in this book is that they had this plot that was formulated by his evil mother to reunite the fractured empire and place Eric as the new emperor. He used his ability to summon the Eye of Palpatine. It's a massive dreadnought or warship that was abandoned, and this ship was to be a bargaining chip for financial backers from Cynics Juvics, who would use this ship as a centerpiece of an allied fleet that would help them rebuild the empire. So the bad guys want to use this ship to build their empire. So think about the parallel prophetically of, the Eye of Palpatine was sent to kill the children. That was the purpose that was created for in this book, like was explained. They're there to go destroy the children of the Jedi. So, and another prophetic word that Robin Bullock had, he mentioned specifically before Roe v. Wade, not to trade Roe v. Wade for gun control, because that was already going to be won. And so there's whole thing about guns as the ship, as a warship being used to trade. You can kind of see these messages have this kind of theme together, right? So the reality of that fact is, the Eye of Palpatine represents this Baal spirit, abortion, all that, right? So let's just look too at Luke and his crew were captured by this AI controlled ship. It's called the Eye of Palpatine, in which they have to fight those indoctrination, injury, and cold manipulation. The overall theme was saving the children. And so the namesake Palpatine, who we saw a little picture of earlier, is initially a senator from Naboo who's presented himself as a charismatic and well-intentioned dude, but in actuality, he's Darth Sidious, a dark lord of the Sith who plans to destroy the Jedi and take over permanent control of the galaxy. So who's that sound like? Somebody trying to take over the galaxy? It's Dark Lord. That's the Satan, right? So let's remind us about Jedi. Obviously Star Wars is fiction and all that, but these are things that are symbolic. A Jedi is a guardian of peace and justice who carries a lightsaber, has ability to use the Force, which is an unseen power. So that's a pretty easy parallel, right? The good guys, or the Christians, carry a sword of light, which is the Bible, and have an unseen power, which would be the Holy Spirit, to help bring peace and justice to the world. So you got this cosmic battle, right? Good and evil, light and dark. And so it's represented through all the stories of Star Wars. But here we can see it playing out in these particular themes. The other major one was artificial intelligence indoctrination. So Luke Skywalker is on this ship battling the thing called the Will, and it attempts to control all those it captures. So let's go back here just so that we're on there. You can kind of read along with some of that off of my notes here as well. So that's what he's trying to get through, right? There's all this, and like we read before, cold manipulation, all that sort of thing, right? And a lot of people said who actually read the book that his story was really difficult to get through. It was like boring or just not a great situation. Well, the last couple of years have not been easy to get through either. And so fake news has been on the forefront, trying to control our consciousness in the last time, as the enemy tries to control us with fear and manipulation. So that's that AI. And the artificial intelligence, for instance, Troy Brewer has been spoken on this recently about just the demonic agenda behind all that. And there's a lot of bots in the conversation, right? And algorithms that have, even if we put this up on YouTube, who knows if it'll even last because of some of the stuff we're talking about, because of this artificial intelligence that's working against truth. So that was the number 3 main point. The final piece of the story. That's where we get to the Callista of the Callista trilogy. So, and it also gets a little weird here just in the book itself, but let's get past the strangeness of what's going on and realize the symbology behind all this. So Callista, who is this? I think if we click over Callista Ming. All right, so she is a love interest eventually for Luke Skywalker. She was a human Jedi Knight from the planet Chad during the waning years of the Galactic War. She's a member of the Rogue Sect Jedi and who were accepted back to the Jedi Order during the Clone Wars to take command of clone troopers, blah, blah, blah. All right. You can read about that if you want. She dies, though. The reality is, and I'm trying to get to where she actually died. I didn't look at this before, so. Yeah, I had Palpatine. At the end of the war, blah, 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 blah. Where are we going here? So anyway, she gives up her life to try to destroy the Eye of Palpatine. That's, if you probably read that, you would see that. I'm not going to go through all of it. So that's who this character was. So, but her Jedi Force spirit, whatever, that's the weird part, goes into the gunnery computer. And when Luke's on board trying to fight through all this, she is assisting him through this technology and like speaks to him on the screen, like types out. So anyway, that's a little weird and all that, but the reality is, you know, Callista, if we look at the meaning, means most beautiful, and meaning can be clear or bright. So I'm looking at this as a picture of the church because what happened? She died. And at the end of the story, someone else goes up their life and she inhabits that body. Weird, I know. That's not something we do in Christianity. But in a prophetic message, somebody's coming back to life. There's a revival of the dead. And this person comes and assists Luke, the hero, with taking down the Eye of Palpatine. The Eye of Palpatine gets destroyed. And, you know, Callista is alive. Luke's, they're together. They go on to fight other battles, which are these other Darksaber, Planet of the Twilight, whatever. I'm not going into any of that. But you can see kind of where this message is, right? We got the final part of this main is the revival. Like that's where we're headed. This is what this is. Callista means most beautiful, clear, bright. God is preparing a spotless, pure bride. And that's what's been going on. We've been prepared through all these things. And, you know, ultimately, abortion was overcome. And as far as Roe v. Wade and continues, the battle still goes on, but that was a huge win. And then the other things that were talked about, that was all tied into that. So you have this manipulation, all this control and indoctrination and things that are going to take place that the enemy's been trying to do. That was tied into that as well, that same spirit that was all there, right? And now it's all coming down. And so obviously that's the book ends up with them winning that particular battle and all that. And so we also are won some battles, continuing battles. Obviously, the ultimate battle has been won by Jesus. So that is my plastene Star Wars prophetic message. Quite the journey to get there, but also wanted to say that really Star Wars in itself is a modern day allegory depicting a war in the heavens, pitting good versus evil. And so it's such an easy allegory in certain ways. And you can see that, like I mentioned in the Mandalorian show that Robin Bullock points out. And once again, this is a little more, I guess, hidden message because people probably don't know about the children of the Jedi, but it's really the children of the righteous. And, you know, there are children of God, like everybody has that potential to be everything that God created them to be. And so, yeah, and many people did not have that opportunity through abortion, but now many more lives will be saved because of that. And excited to see what's going to happen next as we head into revival.